Hey there, good morning, and welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph, and I'm the host of this show, a show that is dedicated to progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal, and other forms of rock genre. Today we're doing episode 4 of my rock greats that thrilled us but have since passed on. I've chose two good people today. People I've known about, heard about, listened to some of their stuff over time. I'm not a huge follower of theirs, and I don't know a lot of their stuff, but I knew more of them than some of the other people, and I decided that part of my criteria was first that I knew something of them and their music in order to do this, and secondly that if I didn't know them or their music, have heard of it, and then thirdly, if I didn't know either of the first two criteria, then it would be somebody who I think had an impact on the rock genre in general. Both of these people I think have had some impact in their own fields, but also on the rock music as a whole. Okay, so the two I've chosen today are John Coltrane, the jazz great, and Otis Redding, the soul R&B rock great. So we'll do John first because he died first, and that's how I like to do it in chronological order. So I didn't make my boards today with my information. I've put my information on paper, like stuff that I need to remember. And the reason I did that is because I got some new glasses, and I just find it might be easier for me to just refer to that rather than the board behind it. So anyways, these two musicians, we'll start with John Coltrane. John Coltrane was a jazz saxophonist who came to prominence in the late 1940s until he died in 1960s. So I'll give you the stats first, and I will need my glasses for this. So anyways, he died September the 23rd, 1926. He was born September the 23rd, 1926, in Hamlet, North Carolina in the USA. And then he died on July 17th, 1967 in Huntington, New York in the USA. Okay, he was a jazz musician, basically a composer, a musician, and a band leader. And he played sax, starting out originally with baritone sax, moving to tenor sax, and then eventually incorporating soprano sax as well. And he also played clarinet as well. And for those of you who know anything about music, clarinet usually is an instrument that saxophone players start out with, and then they progress to saxophone. But not all of them. Some of them stay at clarinet. Clarinet by itself is a great instrument. However, I think it would be difficult to start on sax, so many of them start on clarinet. It's a little bit easier to do. He was, like I said, he was active from 1945 to 67, and he basically had from his second wife, who was a pianist and a harp player as well. He had 3 children: John Jr., who played bass; Robbie, who played sax; and Oran, who played sax, guitar, drums, and vocals. His most notable musical successes were with, he studied, of course, alto sax and clarinet, and then he was influenced, of course, by his father, who was also a musician. He moved on to the Ornstein School of Music in 1943, and he switched at that time to tenor sax. And then later he was in the Navy. He did a stint in the military, 1945 and 46. He played in the Navy band, playing sax for them as well. Okay, so he had his impact. He was of course, he was a jazz musician, so he had a big impact on the jazz scene. And he played with some fairly notable people that I think most people would recognize. I recognized everybody, and I'm not really. I wouldn't say I'm a jazz fan. I don't dislike jazz. I do listen to it when it's on, and I do have a few jazz things. I'm not really a jazz musician, but part of the thing I like about jazz music is that you can hear how jazz and fusion, like rock and jazz, fused into this jazz fusion. And you can also, with the jazz fusion, it's just a step removed from progressive rock, right? Like there's a lot of progressive rock there's a lot of jazz in progressive rock. That's what I should say. And so, being a progressive rock fan, this is probably a little bit like my roots here. There's a little bit of a roots here to progressive rock, along with classical as well. Okay, so anyways, after that, the people that he notably played with: Eddie Vinson, Dizzy Gillespie, Johnny Hodges, Earl Bostic, all great jazz musicians. Now, I do believe that he started with Miles Davis. He came to prom after he'd been with those guys. He joined the Miles Davis Quintet, and that's when he first was noticed. Unfortunately for him, he had some drug issues at the time, and this caused them to remove him from, he was asked to leave the band, which he did. He went on after that to play with Thelonious Monk. I always have a problem with that name. I don't know why. And he played with him for a while, about 6 months, I believe, before he moved on to play with a few other people who I cannot remember here. Okay, so anyways, eventually he became more. He released a few songs like Giant Steps, and he started playing on some of his own stuff. And the biggest thing about him that I recall is once he formed his own band, which was called the John Coltrane Quartet. Sorry, Coltrane Quartet. Wow, that's a tongue tire there. Anyways, he played soprano sax mostly in that. Also, the other members of the band featured McCoy Tyner on piano, Jimmy Garrison on bass, and Elvin Jones on the drums. So they released quite a few albums and tracks under that grouping. And the biggest thing I've listened to a few of his things. The biggest thing about him that I noticed is his virtuality, his virtuosoism, his ability to play the lead part. And there was no guitar in the band, so the sax basically was the lead instrument. And this is not uncommon, especially in early rock. You'll see this quite a bit, where a lot of bands didn't have guitar players. They had saxophone players who took the lead role. And John was that, and he was very good. Like, I listened to his stuff, man. I can see how a lot of musicians who play the saxophone, or maybe not even play the saxophone, but maybe they were guitar players, but were influenced by his soloing ability and his ability to play at high speed. Like, just, the man was gifted, I can say that. So I listened to quite a few of his tracks. It's a pretty smooth player too. A couple of the tracks I listened to were clarinet, like he played the clarinet on them, and guy's good, man. He had that kind of ability, I think, to make the instrument that he was playing. You wouldn't just hear the solo part. He had this kind of ability, and not being a saxophone player. I did play trumpet, but not being a saxophone player, I often wondered how he was able to do this, like to play the lead part, but still sound like there was more than one sax or one trumpet, or not, sorry, one sax or one clarinet in the background. So like he had this kind of filler part. So he must have had some ability to do that. And very fast. Like he was like smooth and fast, But he also could play slow melodic stuff as well. And he did that very well as well. So I think the man was quite gifted, and like so many musicians of that time period, they just they were just beginning to hit their stride, and he was one of these, just beginning to hit his stride and have his influence. Having played with Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk, I'm sure he learned quite a bit there. And he was just starting to hit his stride when he died, and he died of cancer, the great C. But, just fantastic, fantastic musician. If you're a person that's not a jazz person, to me, there's two ways you can take this. Not being a jazz person, you can see the influence of his style and his soloing and his abilities transferred into what a lot of rock musicians were doing, at least in the 60s and into the 70s, where they would use his style of soloing in their own music. It's pretty, I think it's pretty obvious to me anyways. Also, his ability as a sax player. I'm sure many saxophone players in the rock genre studied him. They'd have to. I think he was one of the best, if not the best, sax player of his time period. The other way you could take this is that, this might be something that, a new genre of music for you to listen to. And there is a ton of great jazz stuff out there. Now, I don't mind jazz, but I tend to use jazz in this way. I'm not like, with a lot of rock albums, I will play them on headphones, or I will sit down and just concentrate on the music, and I will just listen to every note and every beat that I can on a particular album. I really like to do that with rock, but I also use some of it as background stuff to listen to while I'm cleaning and stuff like that. And the other thing I like to do with rock is also I like to I like to jump around like a kid and pretend I'm playing, right? And this is common. It's been going on in my life for 50 years, so I'm not changing it now. And anyways, with the jazz, to me, it's more of the listening type. So I could use this in two ways. I can listen to it in the background. That's usually how I get into music, is I'll use it as a background player while I'm doing stuff. And it filters into me. And then over time, I start finding myself concentrating more and sitting down and actually listening to it. That's how I like to operate. So if you're thinking that jazz might be something you were interested in, this guy's a good start here. I mean, all the other guys I mentioned before, Miles Davis and all them, that's a great way to go about it. And this could lead to a whole new genre of music for you. I've tried getting into jazz fusion a little bit more lately too, because I see the connection between jazz fusion, jazz fusion, and then progressive rock. And I don't want to give the opinion here that I'm saying that jazz is at the bottom and then jazz fusion is next, and then you move into progressive rock. That's not the case here. The case is that they're all interwoven. Some progressive rock gets its influence from jazz fusion. Some jazz fusion may get some influence by progressive rock. I don't want to give the impression that I think you have to do one and then the other and then to get to progressive rock. That's not the case at all. Many people just jump back and forth across genres. Some particular, they only play progressive rock, but they do get some influence from jazz, and the same the other way around. Although I think jazz musicians tend to be a bit more of a purist. They tend to be a bit more purist. Anyway, so there you have it. That's John Coltrane, my feelings on John Coltrane and his influence and how he's impacted me. And I think it's pretty obvious today he's impacted me fairly well. A musician I intend to listen to more of in the future. So if I've gained nothing, I've gained that, right? So anyways, we'll be moving on to the second person on my list, which was Otis Redding. Now, I have more familiarity with Otis Redding because he was more immediate in the rock genre that I listened to. He also had some impact on that genre as well. Now, it's not a particular style of rock music that I spend a lot of time listening to, but if you listen to Otis Redding, you're going to be impacted by him, if nothing else, than in his voice, which is very impactful. But First of all, we'll start off in the same manner we have with John Coltrane, which is we'll give the vital stats here. I have been giving certain stats, and sometimes I give them and sometimes I don't, depending on the influence of those stats on the particular artist. And if they had impact on what he's doing, then I gave the stats. If they didn't, I just maybe mentioned them, or sometimes in case I never mentioned them at all. Okay, so in the case of Otis Redding, he was born, I'm going to need my glasses for this, September the 8th, 1941 in Dawson, Georgia, USA. And he died on December the 10th, 1967 at the young age of 26. What a loss. Madison, Wisconsin, USA. And his death was, a classic death that so many rock stars have died from: plane crash. Wiped out almost the entire band. This has happened many times. Buddy Holly comes to mind. Stevie Ray Vaughan. It just doesn't seem to end. Not even Reba McEntire's whole band. I think they were a car crash, if I'm right. Anyways, it's unfortunate, but these things happen. His musical genre that he was in was soul, R&B, and rock. And, of course, he was a vocalist. Now, I think he did dabble into piano and drums and a few other instruments, but he was known as a vocalist. And to me, a very, very, very good vocalist, too. He was active from 1958 till his death in 1967. I didn't mention much about his parents or siblings and children. I'm not sure that they had a huge impact on what he did. His wife and kids did form a band after his death called the Reddings. And I'm not sure that there was much impact there. I didn't really research it too far. He did play in his most notable musical connections were with the Upsetters, the Pine Toppers, Booker T and the MGs, of course, the Bar Kings, and of course Carla Thomas. Somewhat ironically, most of his success came posthumous. Humorous? How do you say that? I don't know. After he passed on, that's when he became more famous. This is a common thing for artists who draw, such as my famous Jack Reed painting of the barn up here. Jack Reed was a person that I knew personally and had a ton of wonderful paintings, and he's become even more famous now since he's passed on. So this kind of thing, is not uncommon among artists. So his impact was primarily on R&B music, and his influence was from Little Richard. And you can hear this in some of his music. He even went as far as to say that Little Richard was everything to him. Without Little Richard, he would never have had a career, because that's what drove him to become a musician, was Little Richard. So, and I'm sure that this has been the case with him and some other musicians the other way, them being driven because of him. So he was, so his, just some of his notable albums, like Paint the Heart was his first debut album. That's the one he did on his own, his first one. And then his first kind of posthumous, I can't ever say this word. After he died, they started releasing his stuff, and the big song that they released was Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, which most people probably know this song or are familiar with it. Maybe they don't. It's not their style of music, but they know of it. I remember this song when I was younger. I liked it quite a bit. And I think the reason that I liked it was that the vocals on this are really good. Like, he has just got one of those voices. He has a very smooth voice, but at the same time you can hear this kind of vibrato, and it's not like, I don't want to get this right. It's not dominating. His vibrato is not dominating, but it's noticeable. It's kind of like in the back, a little bit in the background, so you'll hear it if you listen for it. And he's very good at it. Like, I think it's tastefully used. I don't think he overdoes it. Like some artists, you'll hear them and everything's vibrato and it's just dominating the whole song. And for them, maybe it's perfect, but for him, I think it just fit perfectly with the way he sang. He used it sparingly and not as it's not was front. It wasn't frontal, and I liked it. I liked the way that he did that. So, anyways, he released this song, and then he's had other ones like "Respect" and "The Little Tenderness," and other hits that most of his stuff came out again after he was gone. I think he had one of the best soul voices, R&B voices out there, and you can see his impact on a lot of musicians in the 70s, especially soul and R&B musicians who just had he had a huge impact on. It's just, to me, it's very unfortunate that the man died at 26. I can just imagine what the kind of stuff he would have done later and how much more of an impact he would have had. Even with just the small, 9 years of being active, and maybe only 3 or 4 of them as being really kind of in his own world, doing his own thing. He still is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as he should be, and he's been noted for his vocal abilities. The guy's just had some huge impact already, and in such a short period of time. I think he was a pretty decent person as well. I think he was well liked, and he left home, or he left school when he was 15 to help support his family. That says a lot about his character right there. I don't think he was forced to do it. I think it was something he wanted to do to help his family. And and early on he had he was winning all these little talent shows when he was a teenager, because he had such a strong voice. I could foresee him maybe by the time he was in his late 20s and early 30s. I could see him producing a lot of more rocky stuff, maybe more pop oriented stuff with really strong vocals. This guy could have been a juggernaut of music. As it is, he's still a great, and he's one of the, he may be the first musician I've done in this I can't think of what I'm trying to say here. He may be the first one in this series of videos that I'm doing that you can clearly see that he was a rock grade that thrilled people and has passed on. That's the name of this video set, and you can see that he fits this perfectly. He may be the first of those type to be here. It's the guy, nothing to take away from the previous guys I've done. They all had their impacts and stuff like that. But I think he may be the biggest of them so far. And he was one of the most enjoyable ones to do here. Because I already was familiar with some of his music, and I went back and listened to some of the stuff, and I'm kind of one of these people that I like folk music quite a bit, especially if it mixes well with rock, and there's a few groups that do this very well, Jethro Tull being the first one that comes to mind. But I also liked soul and gospel music for themselves in their own right, and a lot of these influenced R&B, and R&B influenced rock, and and it's just all tied together, and I hate to use the word evolution because it almost makes it sound like the natural progression was to go from the low end to the high end, which is not the case here. Gospel music of itself, soul music of itself, rhythm and blues by itself, jazz by itself are all great genres of music. They don't need to, if you say, progress to this next stage. I don't want to give the impression that they progressed to rock. Maybe some of them might say that they digressed to rock, But anyways, it's just different styles. Some people wanted to do more of this, and some people wanted to do more of this. Some people wanted to do both. Some went back and forth. Some started out doing this and went to this, and then some started doing that and wanted to do more of this. It's just, musicians are artists, and they always want to improve themselves. They always want to try something new. They always want to add a new instrument that they've never used before. I mean, most of them, and some of them want to incorporate a style of music they've heard and have been really liking it and wanting to infuse it into their style of music as well. This is very common. A lot of notable people, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, come to mind as musicians who took on African sounds into their music because they liked it and they wanted to see how it blended with their style of music. And not to me, it blended great. So I see Otis Redding as one of these type of musicians who was very prominent in the soul and R&B, and also liked to do rock because of Little Richard, no doubt. So if you haven't listened to Otis Redding, I think, and again, it's going to be what you're going to get out of this. You can either hear his influence in the rock music that you like, or in some forms of rock music that you haven't not listened to yet, or you can just take his music for what it is and listen to, maybe it'll help you get into gospel music, or maybe it'll help you get into soul, or maybe it'll help you get into rhythm and blues. All very great forms of music that you can experience, and that's really what this whole video series and this whole prog monster thing that I do is about, is getting people to relive and experience music for what it is. And I've chosen the progressive rock field mainly because that's the area that I enjoy the most, but I do have other influences and other styles of music that I wanted to show that they have influence in the area and tie the two together, And I think that if you gain one of those two venues like this, you see how this influenced the music you're into, so you're that much further ahead. Or if you discover a whole set of music that you've never really listened to before, then beautiful, that's made this whole thing worthwhile. So there you have it. Otis Redding, fantastic, and John Coltrane, jazz saxophonist, fantastic, both of them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please like and subscribe to it. This is my episode 4, 1967. I apologize for the lateness of its appearing. There was quite a bit more here than I had originally thought, and I fell asleep last night, so I did most of it this morning. We'll get back onto the 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time dropping of these videos for those of you who have come to expect it at that time period. I like to keep with giving people what they need and what they like to hear. Anyways, the next episode will come forth a couple days from now on Tuesday, featuring again some more prominent people. I don't have my list in front of me, so I'm not quite sure who it is. The next 3 or 4, 68, 69, 70, and 71, have some very, very fairly well-known musicians who are now getting into an area where I kind of have listened to some of these people quite a bit and am much more familiar with their music, and I'm hoping that that'll come through as well. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of a frog here. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video today, and if you have, please make your own comments. Tell me what you know about Otis Redding and John Coltrane. Who were people that impacted you? That's all great stuff. Anyways, from Murph on Prog Monster, you have a great day. Bye.